There you go. Darl. Against the dark doorway he seems to materialize out of darkness, lean as a racehorse in his underclothes in the beginning of the glare. He leaps to the ground with on his face an expression of furious unbelief. He has seen me without even turning his head or his eyes, in which the glare swims like two small torches. Come on, he says, leaping down the slope toward the barn. For an instant longer he runs silver in the moonlight, then he springs out like a flat figure cut leaning from tin against an abrupt and soundless explosion as the whole loft of the barn takes fire at once, as though it had been stuffed with powder. The front, the conical facade with the square orifice of doorway, broken only by the square, squat shape of the coffin on the sawhorses like a cubistic bug, comes into relief. Behind me, Pawn, Gillespie, and Mac, and Dewey, Dal, and Vardamon emerge from the house. He pauses at the coffin, stooping, looking at me, his face furious. Overhead, the flames sound like thunder. Across us rushes a cool draft. There is no heat in it at all yet, and a handful of chaff, C-H-A-F-F, lifts suddenly and sucks swiftly along the stalls where a horse is screaming. Quick, I say, the horses. Gets too loud, huh? I'm just getting hot with this hat, to be real. He glares a moment longer at me, then at the roof overhead, then he leaps toward the stall where the horse screams. It plunges and kicks, the sound of the crashing blows sucking up into the sound of the flames. They sound like an interminable train crossing the endless trestle. Gillespie and Mac pass me, in knee-length nightshirts, shouting, their voices thin and high, meaningless, and at the same time profoundly wild and sad. Cow, stall! Gillespie's nightshirt rushes ahead of him on the draft, ballooning about his hairy thighs. The stall door has swung shut. Jewel thrusts it back with his buttocks, and he appears, his back arched, the muscles ridged through his garment as he drags the horse out by its head. In the glare, its eyes roll with soft, fleet, wild, opaline fire. Its muscles bunch and run as it flings its head about, lifting Joel clear of the ground. He drags it on slowly, terrifically. Again, he gives me across his shoulder a single glare, furious and brief. Even then, they are clear of the barn. The horse continues to fight and lash backward toward the doorway until Gillespie passes me, stark naked, his nightshirt wrapped about the mule's head, and beats the maddened horse on out of the door. Joel returns running. Again, he looks down at the coffin, but he comes on. Where's Cow? He cries, passing me. I followed him. In the stall, Mac is struggling with the other mule. When its head turns into the glare, I can see the wild rolling of its eye too, but it makes no sound. It just stands there watching Mac over his shoulder, swinging its hind quarters toward him whenever he approaches. He looks back at us, his eyes and mouth, 3 round holes in his face on which the freckles look like English peas on a plate. His voice is thin, high, far away. I can't do nothing. It's as though the sound had been swept from his lips and up and away, speaking back to us from an immense distance of exhaustion. Joel slides past us. The mule whirls and lashes out, but he has already gained its head. I lean to Mac's ear. Nightshirt around his head. Mac stares at me, then he rips the nightshirt off and flings it over the mule's head, and it becomes docile at once. Joel's yelling at him, Cow, Cow, back, Mac cries, last stall. The cow watches us as we enter. She's backed into the corner, head lowered, still chewing, though rapidly, but she makes no move. Joel has paused, looking up, and suddenly we watch the entire floor to the loft dissolve. It just turns to a fire. A faint litter of sparks rains down. He glances about. Back under the trough is a 3-legged milking stool. He catches it up and swings it into the planking of the rear wall. He splinters a plank, then another, a third. We tear the fragments away. While we are stooping to the opening, something charges into us from behind. It is the cow. With a single whistling breath, she rushes between us and through the gap and into the outer glare, her tail erect and rigid as a broom nailed upright to the end of her spine. Joel turns back into the barn. Here, I say, Joel. I grasp at him. He strikes my hand down. You fool, I say, don't you see you can't make it back yonder? The hallway looks like a searchlight turned into a rain. Come on, I say, around this way. When we are through the gap, he begins to run. Joel, I say, running. He darts around the corner. When I reach it, he has almost reached the next one. Running against the glare like that figure cut from tin, Paul and Gillespie and Mac are some distance away watching the barn, pink against the darkness, where for the first time the moonlight has been vanquished. Catch him, I cry. Stop him. When I reach the front, he is struggling with Gillespie, the one lean in underclothes, the other stark naked. They are like 2 figures in a Greek frieze, Frieze, isolated out of all reality by the red glare. Before I can reach them, he has struck Gillespie to the ground and turned and run back into the barn. The sound of it has become quite peaceful now, like the sound of the river did. We watch through the dissolving proscenium, proscenium, of the doorway as Jewel runs crouching to the far end of the coffin and stoops to it. For an instant, he looks up and out at us through the rain of... For an instant, he looks up and out at us through the rain of burning hay like a portiere, Portiere, of flaming beads, and I can see his mouth shape as he calls my name. Jewel, Dewey Dell cries. Jewel, it seems to me that I now hear the accumulation of her voice through the last 5 minutes, and I hear her scuffling and struggling as Paul and Mac hold her, screaming, Jewel, Jewel. But he's no longer looking at us. We see his shoulders strain as he upends the coffin and slides it single-handed from the sawhorses. It looms unbelievably tall, hiding him. I would not have believed that Addie Bundren would have needed that much room to lie comfortable in. For another instant, it stands upright, while the sparks rain on it in scattering bursts, as though they engendered other sparks from the contact. Then it topples forward, gaining momentum, revealing Jewel and the sparks raining on him too, in engendering gusts, so that he appears to be enclosed in a thin nimbus of fire. Nimbus of fire. Without stopping, it overends and rears again, pauses, then crashes slowly forward and through the curtain. This time Jewel is riding upon it, clinging to it, until it crashes down and flings him forward and clear, and Mac leaps forward into a thin smell of scorching meat and slaps at the widening crimson edge holes that bloom like flowers in his undershirt. So what happened to Jewel? Did anything happen to Jewel? Alright, that was the end of, I don't know, what is it? That was the end of Vardamon.